That intro may be a little bit old, but the topics are not old. These topics are always moving forward. Welcome to New Energy Crew Podcast. I'm diving right in. I'm excited right now. The person that I have, the guest that I have on right now on Energy Crew Podcast, he is probably, I would say, about 10 to 15% busier than my schedule. So that means that if we do want to have a 15-minute phone call, we have to schedule it about 2.5 months in advance. That's how much road and street this person is covering, spreading the gospel of energy realities and what's on the forefront of whether it's energy, whether it's water, whether all this power generation demand. I've seen his stuff, and I'm not going to give him too much of an introduction because I like having this conversation. So we actually had a conversation because this gentleman is going to be leading a Crew Club Operator Roundtable discussion in May. We started talking. I said, buddy, let's just do a podcast. He's like, you know what? My 11:30 canceled. Let's dive in. So, hey, without further ado, I'm pumped to welcome my buddy. We're rocking hacks. My hacks is only rigs. All right. This is from Landman Life. I dig it because let's get that rig count up if possible. Let's stop having it crash. And Dan Ramito with the managing director. Again, I'm not even looking at your LinkedIn, buddy. That's how much I looked at your stuff. The managing director at Pickering Energy Partners. Brother, how are you?
Good, man. Thanks for having me on. I thought
what a last minute move too to get on this.
I didn't give me the heads up on like this massive production for the introduction. I was like, whoa, where did this come from?
So you know who did that? You know who did that music?
No.
My wife.
Stop it, really?
Dude, she got on like GarageBand. She like sent it to me and like
really?
I got to pay her every time I use it, but still, it's worth it.
You like just like do like chores around the house in forms of like payment,
sure.
Right? No, I thought it was awesome.
Yeah, that type of choice. But yeah, man. So Dan, I'm excited to do this, but I don't even know what we're going to talk about today. But I guess kind of some things I'll tell you from my perspective, and obviously I want your background because you have a unique background. I don't feel like anyone that enters the energy industry has the same background. Okay, so I love everyone's and you and I met over a cup of coffee just because I saw your stuff. So everyone that doesn't know Dan out there, you probably might never recognize the name, but you've probably seen him giving he does a lot of keynote speaking. He does a lot of conversations at energy conferences, kind of about energy realities versus energy expectations. And obviously you can kind of go into what you're talking about. But Dan, not only that, buddy, you can't stop. You're not slowing down. Like, not only are you doing all these speeches, now you're doing like you're leading Crew Club roundtables. Now you're doing books. Not only that, you also have another podcast, man. So podcast, books, speak, like you're doing a lot. Talk to me.
Yeah, I feel like I probably never got rid of like the ADD I had as a kid. I just don't want to sit still, only because I just don't know how to enjoy it. Like the running joke that my wife has is she's sort of given up on asking to go on like these extensive vacations because I just don't know how to, number one, sit still, but also just number two, like just how to enjoy it. Like if there's a thought, I'm not as bad as Larry David. Like Larry David supposedly walked around with like the notebook and write it down. But now I'm doing this thing where like I'll just text myself these ideas. But no, I just, there's a lot of things that are going on. And, it's just my nature, just personally, where if I have this obsessive nature where like if I don't understand something and it's interesting, like I want to go down that rabbit hole and understand it. And that was the genesis of the book, right? The Radical Middle. It was like, why can't we just figure this stuff out? It's actually not that complicated when you get to the core of the matter. But in looking at just how the energy debate has evolved over the last 2 decades, really, it's fascinating to see the evolution of environmental NGOs, how they in most cases don't really care about the environment. They're just these political beings. Yep. It's how the energy industry is somewhat at fault because we don't have the data that we probably should have to just put a lot of these arguments like to bed.
Let me ask you a question on that.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, dude, there's so much I can go in. So you're talking about, the industry not having data and all that stuff. For me, I challenge that. I think it's not a question if this industry has data. I just think if this industry has historically done a pretty poor job of, and again, I don't want to say, oh, you need us. The reality is you need us. I don't like that approach because I think that divides more than brings people together.
Right.
We've done a pretty poor job. I mean, think about it. We're an industry of engineers and we're thinking data and facts and percentages are going to change hearts and minds. In reality, you're right. 2 decades, the conversations have changed because they have gotten more. So whether it's sort of lack of storytelling.
Yeah, I mean, I got into the energy space almost on accident. To your introduction earlier, I was at NASDAQ for almost 10 years and I was running their analytics desk. That was just a really fancy way of saying the stock exchange itself would collect all this data and we never did anything with it. And so I firsthand saw the impact of when you have access to data and you retrofit it into something constructive, the impacts both from a storytelling, from a narrative perspective, but also from a financial perspective as well. When Adina Friedman came into being CEO, and Adina is awesome. I'm being sincere on that. I wouldn't be sitting in this chair or have the opportunity with Pickering right now if it wasn't for her. She's very personable. She's very intelligent, and to her credit, she understood that the longevity of NASDAQ wasn't centered on being the stock exchange, right? We had to be a fintech. That means we had to provide technology solutions to our issuers, not necessarily just to grow, but to expand or to be able to compete for capital and narrative and minds in like this next century. So what we ended up doing was we built a lot of behavioral models. At that given time, if you were going to pursue capital as a small or a mid cap, it's a little bit different for like a mega cap, like Microsoft.
So these behavior models, they were more for like, how does the organization behave, or has
no. So it was more based on the behavioral tendencies of investors. Okay. So if you were a small cap technology company with a balance sheet of X and cash flow of Y and margin of Z and trading volume of A, we could tell you the individuals that displayed the highest probability of buying your stock and how many meetings it would take. I mean, we got it down to a pretty granular science.
Damn.
And that business was very, very successful. And we began utilizing it to entice energy companies to switch from the New York Stock Exchange to NASDAQ. NASDAQ, they probably don't like this, but they're known obviously as a technology exchange. They have healthcare, they have industrials, they run the gamut in terms of sector representation. But at the time, they didn't necessarily have energy companies.
So was this energy direction or this energy migration, was this more of a, hey, I'm Dan, I'm interested in energy, why don't we have, or is this like a...
No, I didn't care. I didn't know anything really about energy. I just knew that, we had this internal divide. Ideologically, there was more of a dogmatic crowd that was like, do we really want to partner with oil and gas? And it was for the obvious reasons. And then there was like the reasonable side, like, hey, this represents an economic opportunity. And frankly, none of us understand the oil and gas space. So like, let's investigate. And then this is like 2015, 2016. And then Larry Fink came out with his letter on ESG. This is like 2019, right before COVID.
Right.
And the world was just like, what is this black magic you lay upon me? And so we started working with clients on how to navigate ESG. We worked with a lot of energy clients on like, what do the capital markets really want? How do we interpret this? How do we
with something well, not to interrupt, that's what I do. I like to ask my wife, I interrupt. So with something so new, I remember when ESG first started kind of getting center stage, right? With something so new, how do you really kind of communicate that to the investment community if you really don't know the implications?
Yeah, so you'll love this story. Like I was asked that very same question, and the big thing, I was like, why don't we talk to the source themselves? Like, why don't you ship me out to Europe? I'll go. Like, begrudgingly, I'll just go to Europe.
I have to go to Ibiza. I'll go.
I have to go to Europe. Please send me. And I will talk to these investors and I will sort of get the lay of the land. So I was in Frankfurt, London, Stockholm, Copenhagen. It was great. The food was way too expensive and not necessarily as good as America. But just talking with these guys, I'm like, just give me the lowdown. Like, how do you think about this? Like, what should we be doing? What is your advice? And I would just literally sit there and just take like notebooks of notes. And then I came back to the States and we had all this demand because look, I was boots on the ground in Europe. Like, if you want to,
and they were leading the ESG, I guess.
Oh yeah, like man, the one thing that's crazy that in the United States, to back up a little bit, and this is a great example given the perceived turmoil and volatility in the markets. People don't realize that about 70% of the trading in the markets today is quantitative. It's all driven by algorithms. The vast majority of trading takes place with an algorithm. And so algorithms are programmed to look at very specific levers that they can buy or go short on. It's not some dude sitting behind a computer and be like, oh my God, I'm freaked out, I'm going to sell. There's some of that, but it's dominated by the quantitative market. In Europe, you have the exact opposite. You have a quantitative presence. You have an algorithm in place to say, but you're talking about pension money and endowment money. So their investment horizon is 20, 25, 30 years out. And there is this growing perception in Europe that there is this climate crisis and, oh my God, what are we going to do? It's the end of the world. And of course, that's not necessarily the case. But it started as like this on the extreme, and it's gotten slightly better. I would say the Europeans are a little bit more, there's a little bit more of a frenzy over there in terms of all things climate. But when we came back to the States, I was like, it was like head blown, right? And it was like, what the hell I have some people saying that renewables and wind and solar are going to take oil and gas tomorrow. I have some people saying that renewables are never going to penetrate the market. I have other people saying that it's going to be the balance. I have other people saying, the end of the world is in like 3 weeks. So build your bunker and get like your, food and your ammo. And I was like, what the hell?
So wait, so that's a tough thing. I'm going to pause you real quick because that's a tough thing because there is a lot. I think if you kind of lean into one of those niches, like, the sky's falling, the ice caps are going to melt, or fossil fuels will be gone in 10 years, or it's never going to replace. I think if you lean into that, you can make a career out of that. Sure. But when it comes to what you're trying to do, and again, what Mike Umbro is trying to do, what me and him try to do with energy fact checks and all that stuff, it really is kind of like bridging energy expectations, like, oh, the sky's falling, with energy realities. Like, well, physics doesn't allow that. So you have a lot of different noise. So it's like, how do you pull out of that noise and say, okay, well, let me get my bearings right?
Yeah, man. I mean, at that time, to your point, it's like, well, there's so many differing opinions. Like, I'm just going to do the work myself and come to my own conclusions. And plus, I found this stuff really, really interesting. So, for a good 2-3 years, it was like, what's the state of the state on oil and gas? What's the state of the state on renewables? What's the state of the state on the technologies? And then, doing that, you're like, well, these things are interconnected because you have infrastructure in the United States, you have connectivity, you have distribution, you have utilities, you have like this just landscape of all this sort of complementary or adjacent considerations. And I'm like, well, I'm going to learn it because I just thought it was interesting. So you would just nerd out and do the work. And the benefit of that, in addition, outside of just learning it, right, was you could apply that in the business world by providing advice. Like, people at the time, and even today, I mean, that's what our business basically does. There's all this sentiment, all this opinion, all this perspective, all this volatility, all this turmoil. It's like, dude, I just want steady Eddie. What is the course ahead? And how do we do that in a way that's the most effective and the most efficient? So the blueprint that we put in place for clients was actually the blueprint that I put myself. It's like, put everything in the proverbial grinder, right? The funnel, and you funnel out all the BS and the noise and the shenanigans. And then what comes out on the other end is actually pretty practical perspective and really useful advice to incorporate into strategy.
Well, what's interesting about that, I think doing the work, like, for example, you're doing the homework, you're diving into it. And this, again, I might be leading you on all this stuff, but from what I see is you dive into a subject like that, into all this noise, you come up with your own assumptions and all this stuff. But I would assume that leaves you in such an advantageous position, not only to understand, hey, listen, this is where we're at today. Take away the noise, take away these layers of bullshit and all that stuff. This is where we're at today. But that also kind of gives you an opportunity to say, okay, well, where are some bridges that need to be built for tomorrow? Because I think that from a lot of stuff that you've talked about, and I may be wrong, a lot of stuff that you've talked about, it's a lot of like, this is where we're at today, but these are the bridges that we need to be built.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, I think the oil and gas industry is amazing for a variety of different reasons. It doesn't necessarily mean that we are perfect, right? And so I tend to look at this of how do we maintain the relevance and the legitimacy and the power and the capabilities of the oil and gas space. Like, I think sometimes I get overly frustrated because oil and gas can be perceived as an echo chamber, right? We're awesome, we're amazing. And like, you're in the short term, you're like, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there's these things on the horizon that we should be very, very mindful of. And I'll give you a couple different examples. The first example is when it comes to, let's just call it environmental transparency, and there's a lot to be lumped into that little bucket. The United States is the outlier, right? They are the outlier relative to the rest of the world. Our partners, whether it's Japan, Korea, the EU, Canada, South America, I'm not going to throw China in there. It's a different conversation. They're not our partner.
Too soon.
But in any case, they look at this topic differently. And I think that we, particularly in the United States, but certainly in the United States energy sector, have a little bit of dissonance going on in terms of like what we think we should do is what we think the rest of the world should do. And a lot of that overlaps, but they just view it differently. The second component is, and I just wrote about this extensively, because there's the growing consensus, which is correct, that natural gas is going to lead the way. We feel, the participants in the sector feel that they're in the driver's seat. Objectively speaking, they are not, right? It is the tech bros who do tech bro stuff who are calling the shots. The tech bros didn't wake up one day and said, natural gas is amazing. The tech bros said, we have this insatiable demand that is about to take place.
AI.
Right, for power. And we want it to be reliable, and we want it to be affordable. And we don't want any of the shenanigans associated with anything that could infringe upon our ability to become the dominant AI player globally. What source of energy provides us the greatest means or the greatest capability of achieving that? It's natural gas. So there's a very, it's subtle, but there's a very distinct mindset where the energy sector thinks natural gas is great because we know all the merits of natural gas. The tech bros don't give a shit what it is. They are not pro fossil fuel or pro renewables. They are pro what works.
Right.
Whatever works, they want. Now, there's also this, I think we're operating in this statute of limitations. We have this window. The tech bros are not going to wait around for natural gas in particular to figure it out. They're not going to wait around for permit reform. They're not going to wait around for judicial review reform. They're going to say, look, we have this problem. We will figure it out. And there's this convergence between technology and energy where we have to get along, right? It's sort of like, two divorced families that have kids and the kids are moving in together, like stepbrothers, right? Like,
not as funny though. I wish it was that funny.
Yeah. Technology's not going to be able to play the drum set. And then energy is not going to use the nunchucks, right? Just like in Step Brothers, they're going to.
Let me ask you a question though. So with that mindset, obviously, I think. Listen, I'm speaking generalities here because I don't like. Because listen, I mean, I could generalize, people in the oil field. I could generalize people in tech, the tech bros.
Yeah, sure.
But I think when it comes down to I would say what drives the public perception would be more on the tech bro side, right? Yeah, that's really driving. So if tech bros are saying natural gas is good, natural gas is a clean fossil fuel or something like that, or it's green, whatever you want to market it, I think that would have a bet. So my question is, how does a outdated, well, it's the most relative industry out there, but how's an outdated industry such as fossil fuels and the tech industry? Because everything I've read, I think you did something that was like if you have ChatGPT do like one email, it's like this much energy and it's this much water.
Right.
So how do we all come to the table and kind of I'm not saying differences, but because I don't think we're being different at all, but how do we all come to the table and have the same conversation to build and get more beneficial than it is to.
Foundationally, one of the things that technologists are really, really good and what they take to heart is everything's immeasurable. And to a certain extent, we do employ that within the energy space. But what we don't do a good job of, and it's getting much better, is number one, we have to improve the confidence that we have in the data that's tracked because we have to improve the technology that's utilized to measure emissions, right? Like we are at a point where the cost benefit does in some cases make a lot of sense. There are, of course, regional constraints to that, but generally speaking, it just appears weird, particularly to the tech bros who do have, the vast majority of them do have emissions related goals. And some of them, I think are foolish. And so I think it's not a good idea to sit back and judge the merit of the climate goals that the tech bros release. The fact of the matter is they have them. And I would even make the argument that they have them in most cases because their supply chain is increasingly reliant on Europe. And this is codified into law in Europe. And the Europeans are not going to repeal it or just anytime soon. So like you have this downstream effect where the tech bros are reliant on the European market for their supply chain because the European supply chain is subject to a variety of emissions related laws.
It aligns with their goals.
They're going to have to, at the very least, get the data from the energy companies who are providing them with the energy source. Like it's just a natural downhill effect. But to your question on like, how does that improve? Number one, the general market doesn't necessarily appreciate how energy really works. That's our fault.
Is it appreciate or understand?
Both. It's underappreciated and misunderstood. You know, in the book I wrote, I almost fell out of my chair. This is like 3 years ago. There was a lady, very smart, CFA, very established, very experienced, who literally told me that electricity comes from electricity, right? And she couldn't explain to me how electricity came, you know, how electricity was sourced. And it was fine, but it was like, that was actually the genesis for writing the book. I'm like, if this lady, who once again, objectively super cool, super smart, pushing back on, you know, the renewable versus fossil fuel, if the foundational premise of her rebuttal to me saying we need more natural gas was she didn't understand how electricity worked in the first place, clearly there's like a whole other like segment of society that just doesn't understand it as well. And most of that is shaping public perception.
You can't fault them though, man. I grew up in Connecticut.
It's our fault. It's the sector's fault. Like we do it, right?
I grew up in Connecticut. I had no idea. I had no idea about the energy space before I entered it. And actually, I just recently got a Tesla. And relax, y'all. I've recently got a Tesla. I think it's an amazing piece of technology.
Awesome.
And I was driving my 11-year-old daughter, and she's like, you know, you can't get this. You say, like, at the end of the day, like, this is charged from natural gas. Natural gas, obviously, she's just regurgitating what I'm saying, but these are the conversations that at 11 years old, I would never know that electricity is brought from natural gas.
Right. Yeah. And now, like, even the stakes are a little bit higher because you have very bad policy. Like one of the things that's fascinating to me, electricity demand for the better part of a quarter century was flat. Like we just didn't have it. So we just took it for granted. You never had this spike or this drop in electricity. It was just like this steady eddy line for the better part of a couple generations. So we were conditioned to just take it for granted. And now you have this aspect where people are like, wow, AI is amazing. Like the stuff you can do on ChatGPT, the capabilities that generative AI will present to us, the efficiencies, the geopolitical standing, the economic opportunity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Everyone universally agrees that's amazing. And you're like, just wait a second. Like we don't have the infrastructure in place to facilitate that degree of demand. They're like, well, what are you talking about? It's like you need this incremental amount of power to fuel the generative AI ecosystem. They're like, well, why can't we just do that? It's like, right. They're like, well, yeah, we'll just do it. It's like, no. Like we have infrastructure considerations. We have judicial review considerations. We have permit reform considerations. We have water infrastructure considerations. And then so you go down this list and you're like, wow, man, like we are actually really, really behind. And if we don't get our act together and get policymakers to understand how this shit really works, like China is going to hand it to us. Because if they want to build a power plant tomorrow, they'll just build it.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a question. I went to the Pickard Energy Partners Energy Conference in Austin. Yeah. And first off, you did a phenomenal job. But I think there was a lot of the themes that I loved how y'all touched on the water. You touched on electricity. You touched on power plants. You touched on all things energy, which I dig. But I thought something, again, I'm kind of regurgitating what you just said. Something to me, obviously I want your input on this too, is that whether it's natural gas, whether it's AI, whether it's water, I feel like the United States, and tell me I'm full of shit or not, but I feel like the United States is probably about 10, 15 years saying, hey, we know we should be doing this. We know we have to do this, but that's going to be another 10 years before it becomes a problem. And in 10 years, it becomes a problem. It's going to be a nightmare. So why is there, and what can be done to accelerate these necessity infrastructure upgrades to our power, to our water, to our whatever? Like, where are you seeing the biggest, like, bang your head against the wall?
I mean, the biggest bang against my wall is, so we do a lot of advocacy work
Yeah.
as well. And the advocacy work that we do predominantly centers on just giving a very objective and empirical state of the state.
Who do you give this to? Are you speaking inside the echo chamber? Or are you going outside the echo
outside,
chamber?
like inside and outside? It's funny,
Okay.
like when we speak inside the echo chamber, it's like here's like it used to be like here's the ESG guy, and I would hate that. It's like nope. But then when I'd go to like New York, it's like it probably didn't help. I was joking that I wore my boots, right? But they're like, hey, if you watch Landman, and like all they want to talk about is like Landman. It's like, do cartels really kidnap people? It's like, dude, I don't know. Like, it's a great show. Like Ali Larder, God bless her. Like, you know, I grew up with what was it, James Vanderbeek? Varsity
Dawson's Creek.
Yeah, Varsity Blues. And it was like, okay. Anyway, so it's a good point. Outside the echo chamber, for those who are genuine, right, and not anchored to any sort of agenda, it very much is this very interesting wake-up call, because the comments that I get in New York or Boston, Illinois, definitely Wisconsin, is like, I never knew this existed. I was unaware of these adjacencies, and I'm going to just reconsider things differently. Like, and that's honestly the best compliment that I can get, because that's the whole point. It's like, here's the state of the state, and I'm just going to tell you in charts, graphs, and tables what the economic reality of the day is, and whatever determination you want to make, go for it. Like, I don't care. Like, I'm not here to like convince you. I'm just here to educate you, and you're a grown up and you can figure it out yourself. In Texas and Oklahoma, the feedback is a little bit different. It's either very defensive, which it's not intended, obviously, to be a like to attack the industry, but it is to be honest and say, we want all this cool stuff, but we don't have these measures in place. Like in Texas, the state of our water is terrible. And then our infrastructure is not that great. And people rally or rail against California, as they should. The age of the infrastructure in California is exactly the same age as the age of the infrastructure in Texas. Like we have to figure this stuff out and have to incorporate these things. Otherwise, like all these people moving here, all these businesses moving here, all these capabilities that are coming to the state, like they'll just leave and find the place that they can get it done in, right? So it's this temporary thing. We want it to be a permanent thing.
It's mind-boggling the level of, obviously, don't get me wrong, not mind-boggling level of pride, but the level of echo chamber that we all speak to. Yeah. So, for example, Mike Umbro, we'll talk about stuff, and people are like, chiming in like, oh, don't California my Texas, don't keep that California policy. I'm like, policy doesn't have any boundaries. California said all electric by 2035. New Jersey said all electric by 2035. Another place said that. So whatever poor energy policy that's based off of energy reality or expectations or virtue, whatever like that, that policy is really collapsing California's economy. Look at Germany. Germany did the same thing, dropping coal plants. Now they're
dropping nuclear, which makes zero sense.
It's a freaking mess. But those are poor energy policies derived from energy expectations. So whenever I sit at these tables and all that stuff, and people are I'm like, hey, like I bring this up, like, hey, like Midland could get shut down because of a lizard. Oh, they're not going to shut down. They need Midland. I think for me, it's the blind pride of thinking like they need us so much. The government can never come in and shut down a place like Midland. It's like, no, like policy changes. That's why you need to be active in having these conversations.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and once again, I think, we've seen it in the prior administration that ignorance can very much lead to poor policy that we have to spend literally years retrofitting to make sure that we don't lose some of the things that we take for granted today. It doesn't make any sense that we have this component in place where we just picked wind and solar because we liked wind and solar. Like another thing that people don't necessarily realize, and I was being cute with the title, but empirically it's true. It's like American coal is cleaner than Chinese solar.
Yes.
But when you hear coal, people are, oh my God. Well, there's actually some aspects to coal. Are you timing out?
No, I was saying no, coal is negative. Like, get that away from me. My dad's echoing you. My dad.
There's aspects of coal, particularly American coal, that make
it's recording on your end too.
It's what?
I said it's recording on your end, so there might be gaps. Just keep talking. But no, my dad says that the U.S. coal market's a lot cleaner than people think.
Oh, like, and the technology, like we have coal clients, like, and I would think that anyone in most cases would look at coal in a sort of like a sort of a sensitive, with a sensitive perspective. Like some of the technology, particularly from a health and safety perspective, like is not even the second place in the globe is not even close to America's first place. Like, but they don't necessarily do a great job of conveying that to the public. And I know like you don't want to do like the cheerleader rah-rah thing, but when it comes to policy, like what we don't necessarily understand or appreciate is that some environmental NGOs, not all of them, but a significant portion of environmental NGOs, all they do on a daily basis, literally a daily basis, is push their data, their narrative, their disclosure, their material to policymakers that don't necessarily establish like any ends of the extreme. They're like, look, I'm just going to take what I have readily available. I'm going to make a decision. I think those days are ending. I think the word is out on certain environmental NGOs that work at more as a political entity. But that doesn't necessarily relieve the industry of providing their data, their disclosure, their narrative to those who make decisions on this stuff. Because we do see, I agree with your point, like California, they're not going to get their head out of their ass until something really, really bad happens. Yeah. Like that's unfortunately going to be the case. And what's really, really frustrating, and I actually outlined this in the book, is that it's documented that whenever California gets into trouble with the grid, they immediately go to natural gas. California imports a significant portion of their oil from Iran, right? So when you're talking about like one of the more liberal states, which is fine, but then when you talk about where they turn to get their oil, like the social values of Iran and California aren't necessarily aligned.
It's not in my backyard mentality in California, right? That's been something that we've talked about, like U.S., obviously oil and gas is a lot cleaner than Iran. I mean, they're pumping out 7 times the carcinogens a year than we are in 7 years. There's some ridiculous numbers like that. So let's pull back from coal. I want to kind of talk about your key points and kind of get in where people can find you. So right now, obviously, you've been going about this. You've been at PEP. I saw you did ESG. Then you were advocate. Now you're doing something kind of. You're kind of so. Where has your message?
Yeah.
Where are you at today with your message, and what are you seeing that number one that's opportunistic or maybe optimistic for you that you're seeing in the energy space? And number two, what's something that if you could just have everyone understand this significance, you bang your head against the wall, what would be those two? Like, what's the biggest thing you're optimistic about, and what's the biggest thing you're like, there's a huge collision coming?
Yeah, I would say the first thing is it's really hard to argue with data, right? It's really hard to argue with charts, graphs, and tables. And to that point, it's not necessarily, it's one thing to have the data. It's quite another to have a high degree of confidence in that data. So if you think about directionally what is taking place, even if there's a pullback on the regulatory front from the Trump administration, there's all this technology being employed by environmental NGOs that are going to measure your emissions, for example, for you. Yeah. And they're going to submit that data to policymakers, regulators, politicians, any investors. And so if you're not in a position to immediately rebut what they're inevitably going to accuse the industry of, like you're doing the industry a disservice. And to that point, context really, really matters. Connecting the dots. I think, we got cute with the technergy discussion or term. Like I just had Ben Dell, he's the CEO of Chemridge, on my podcast. And he goes, one of the most fascinating trends taking place in the market that no one is necessarily talking about is the convergence between technology and energy that is happening really, really quick. In fact, I would even make the argument that, Expand, like one of the largest US natural gas producers in the United States, is a key component within the supply chain of Amazon or Microsoft or Google, right? It's no longer like energy is over here and technology is over
Right.
here.
Yeah, it's a great call.
This kind of like converging reliance where expand or any producer, mind you, is a significant cog within technology's supply chain because they need that power. And then real quick, that third component would be like, I think we got to get the water thing and the infrastructure thing fixed really, 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 really quick. The most water intensive businesses on the planet, semiconductor manufacturing, which is being reshored to Arizona where there is no water.
Right.
And then Texas, West Texas in particular, is subject to drought all the time. And then the state of the water as it's measured by the EPA, I think it's got like a D rating. It's not great. And then infrastructure, like we have this tendency to just focus on generation. We need to start focusing on transmission and distribution because they're probably more important. Like we can create this stuff, no problem. Getting it from point A to point B in the most efficient and quickest manner possible, whole other story.
Well, let's pull back a little bit. Talk to me about that water threat, because I think a lot of people don't understand. So I love how you're combining energy and technology, because you're seeing whether it's SpaceX, whether you're seeing these energy companies put nuclear reactors back online, or put invest in natural gas. So you're seeing this, but that's the key component. I don't think a lot of people, or some people, are talking about, but it's the water requirements of this AI, of this technology that keeps on advancing. And here's the deal: AI is not slowing down. So this water component is so crucial.
So I'm going to play a game, right? I'm going to put you on the spot, and we're going to do a little guessing here. And I'm pulling it up. Put me on the spot on my podcast, Dan. Thanks, appreciate it. My board presentation. So like, there's several boards that I've spoken to in like the last, I don't know, call it 6 months, probably, I don't know, 10 to 12. And the whole gist of the board presentation was like, what aren't we thinking about? Okay. And water was up there. And so like what I do is like with the board, I play like this Jeopardy game. All right. On average, how many gallons of water does a Google hyperscale data center use? What's the average amount of annual water utilized by a Google hyperscale data center?
I would have no concept.
Take a guess.
A billion, 1.2.1. I don't know.
It's 164 million gallons of water per year.
So that's close and far off.
That's one hyperscale data center.
So how many data centers are at, like, what's happening?
Right now we have 5,000. By 2030, we're going to have 5,000 more, right? So you just think about that in terms of magnitude. This one of these things, just to put things in perspective, and like one Olympic-sized swimming pool has 660,000 gallons of water. So if you think about how much water one hyperscale data center uses, it's about 109,000 Olympic swimming pools every year. That is crazy. When you tack on the estimated amount of hyperscale data centers that it's going to be here in the next 5 years, that 109,000 Olympic swimming pools goes to 450,000 Olympic swimming pools. That means that on an annual basis, data centers alone will use the same amount of water that is in Lake Tahoe.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
That's going to be a requirement. Is that a reality, though?
Man, not unless we get the water thing. That's what I'm talking about. Like, are we going to be able to facilitate using Lake Tahoe every single year? Like, probably not. There's water technology, water efficiencies, water treatment, like all these other things. I've had no joke executives look me dead in the eye and be like, why is water such a important thing? And once again, to be fair, it's 3 years ago. But here, I'll give another example. So here we go. How much water does it take to produce one semiconductor chip? How much water?
2 Lake Tahoes. No, I don't know.
One semiconductor chip requires 1,000 gallons of water.
Man, I saw something where someone, like a simple, like, hey, fix my email, ChatGPT, was like, I think it was like, obviously you probably know more. It was like, I think I actually read it off of your thing. It was like 15 gallons of water for like one, hey, can you fix this grammar on my email?
Well, let's just put it in context of power demand. So, you need about, for every kilowatt hour of power that's generated, you need 5 gallons of water. So if you think about the incremental demand just from power that we're going to meet, and you're going to marry that with water demand, and then you're talking about, hey, we have these geopolitical tensions, which it actually makes a lot of sense to reshore, very important critical industries, semiconductors. And then you combine the fact with, just like you said, like Chat GPT, there's not enough water now we will figure this out. I'm confident of it. But when you talk about like, well, who are the companies that do it really, really well? And that can act as the blueprint for other companies to utilize, not to steal their IP or their technology, but certainly to understand where we're at. Like 5 years ago, man, no one really tracked water. And when investors started asking about, well, give us your water policy, at least initially, there was some contingent in the oil and gas space. There's like really like this left wing environmental, like
big brother looking at,
It's like, no, like smart investors. And once again, this is them conveying it to me. Smart investors were like, look, China's not going to become any less aggressive. That means a couple different things. Mostly Taiwan is increasingly in peril. If Taiwan is in peril, that means the United States has the potential not to get all the semiconductor chips that they need. Like that provides a variety of bottlenecks in the supply chain.
That's a big deal.
If we reshore that, which we should, it looks at like that's way, especially when Trump was, climbing up in the polls. Like we want to understand who's doing a really, really good job because they have an incredible competitive advantage. Like let's put our money not just there because of the water metrics, like the whole the financial profile. But you talk about, a very competitive landscape. There's these tidbits here and there that provide a competitive differentiation, or at least an element of comfort as to like, well, why should we invest in company B as opposed to company C? So I think it all comes back down to like the pursuit of capital. But particularly when you talk about, our ability to compete, not today, but in 20 years, almost everything is predicated upon generative AI. And if you don't have semiconductor chips because you don't have water, we don't compete on generative AI. It's just not capable.
I feel like and I may be wrong, it might be with my pay grade, but I feel like the U.S. system is based on terms versus forward thinking down the line. Hey, listen, I mean, that's what I feel. Listen, I think we can keep on talking for an hour and a half, but I want to talk to you about your kind of ADD creative side right now. So listen, man, I remember you sent me something before we even met. You're like, hey, dude, we're going to meet. Here's like my presentation. Like you sent it like at 10 p.m. at night. I stayed up looking at it till like 11:30. I loved it. I geek out on stuff like that. But man, so like I feel like in the past like 3 or 4 months, like you've been really applying your, I don't know if it's, again, we talked about this boredom, waiting for delayed flights or whatever like that. But talk to me about each of these little projects that you're doing and how people can find it, and kind of not just the inspiration, but like I guess we're like, what are they all about?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think this is a testament to how Dan Pickering has sort of organized his firm, right? He wanted people that were researchers at heart. Like Dan at heart is a research analyst. Like he's going to kill me for saying that. I think at his core, like he still walks around with like the legal pad and the pen, and he writes literally everything down, and he'll research it ad nauseum. Like we are kindred spirits in that regard. So I think I just have this natural tendency to be curious about things that I think are interesting, and I want to figure it out. There's also this overlap with the common denominator question that clients are asking us, like, why is water important? Like we're getting all these water questions from investors, like fine, but like, well, why? And it's not because an investor found environmental Jesus, right? There has to be some rational, reasonable
financial decision,
financial reason. Like investors are in the business of making money, right? So there's got to be something to that. We heard a lot of people are like, American coal, like we don't need coal. And then you talk to Console, for example, who just rebranded. I can't remember what their new name is, but they're like, look, dude, 80% of our sales is foreign. Like, we're like, oh, wow. Okay. Like there's something to that. So American coal is cleaner than Chinese solar. The U.S. energy needs a larger boat, right? So I was watching Jaws because the movie's awesome. And I'm like, wow, like we need a larger boat. The tech bros are calling the energy shots, which, we're talking to a lot of the tech bros. And like, my question was like, we have this sort of pivotal shift in policy perspective that emphasizes the importance of not necessarily focusing exclusively on climate. Like, what are you guys going to do? And they all say, like, from, supply chain to policy to investor relations, they all will say, every one of the tech bros except Tesla, interestingly,
don't point at me.
All of them, I've spoken to almost all of them, are like, we're not backing down on the climate stuff. Number one, we can't, because we have a European supply chain and this stuff is codified in Europe. And then there's the argument of like, well, why doesn't Europe just get rid of it? Dude, if you thought European bureaucrocy took forever to get stuff done, it takes even longer for it to repeal. So they're at the mercy of the bureaucracy either way. There's these questions that come about where if there's enough of the questions, I think it's worth my time to sort of get a reasonable answer that's based on research and data and objectivity. And I just like writing to kill the time. I've actually got a pretty nice little system going where it's like,
so number one, Dan, you got. I'm doing this out there for the listener. You got a Substack, I believe.
No, I post everything on my LinkedIn. Like, just
I do too. Yeah,
posted, and then the Petronoia podcast is there as well.
So you write articles, you'll do blogs, you'll do whatever you want to call that, right? And the second thing you just started doing, can you name your podcast?
Yeah, it's Petronoia. So the Upright Digital guys are great. Josh Lowry.
Josh is legit.
He's such a good guy. He's like, I mean, this
Ralph over there.
No, I mean, the guy I'm working with is mostly Josh, but me and Josh were sort of just like shooting the shit. And not that we were like, we had a couple beers, like whatever. And he's like, you should do the podcast. And I was like, yeah, man, totally. Didn't think twice about it. It was like, whatever. And then he called me like 2 weeks later. He's like, the studio's ready. Like, let's go. I was like, oh.
You gotta love Josh for that. You gotta love
him. I mean, just totally sporadic, but there's a method behind his madness and it makes sense. He's been a great partner. But one of the things that I wanted to do, like whether it's working out or like at my kids' football practice or walking the dog, whatever, like big podcast listener. One of the things that I thought was missing within the space was a lot of the podcasts in the space talk to people in the space. And I don't want that. Like I'm going to have a couple environmentalists on. I've had, people in the space, like Mike Howard is a CEO for Howard Energy Partners. And the interesting thing about Mike is he's obviously a massive proponent of the space, but he's actually really fair and objective in his thinking, and his perspective on everything is really refreshing. And if you look at like his background, the dude's a self-made man. And so he just brings a unique perspective to that. So what I want to accomplish on the Petronoia podcast was, oil and gas is badass. And there's, a whole group of people who are awesome that work in the industry. But I want something that counters sort of like what everyone is doing on the consensus side with
get out of the echo chamber.
Think about 100%. Like Ben Dell was just on. He's the CEO of Kimmeridge. And you think I could talk for 2 hours? Good Lord, man. I could listen to that guy talk for like days. Like just super interesting perspective on where the world of energy is going.
Don't you love running across people like that? Like, Dan, I view you as one of those people. I view like Mike Umbro as one of those people, like friends of mine that are like, I love having people that you just kind of like sit down with and they just like geek out and they're passionate about it, but they're giving you not the echo chamber BS that we all have. They're giving you like outside perspective. So I love how you're doing that, talking outside the industry.
The best career advice I got. So like when I was at NASDAQ, I was lucky enough to be selected in this group where they would have board members kind of like sit you down and basically explain to you the way the world works. Okay. And at the time, one of the guys on the NASDAQ board was Steve Black. Steve was the right-hand man to Jamie Dimon during the financial crisis. So Jamie Dimon was the one who gets credit for like getting JP Morgan through the crisis and expanding the bank the way that it was. But it was actually Steve that was like his mercenary, right? Steve was like, Jamie, what do you want to do? And Steve was the one that actually got it done. And great guy, total no bullshit whatsoever. And he sat me down and he's like, if you want to be successful in life, he's like, you will listen to everybody that disagrees with you. you will just sit down and you will shut your mouth and you will listen. And it's hard and it's difficult and it sucks and you're not going to like it. But what that's going to facilitate is the ability to think more critically, to offer better solutions, to understand the world from outside your lens. And he goes, because your lens, I was like, I think I was like 30 or whatever it was. I was younger. He's like, at this age, at this level, he's like, your opinion doesn't mean shit. I was like, okay, man. And like, I really took that to heart. I mean, the other thing that he said too, which I really took to heart and doesn't apply to this, he's like, whether you like it or not, you're always in sales. And so like those two pieces of advice were great. Like, and I'm like, man, why did I go to business school? I could have called Mike Howard and drank like 2 or 3 beers with Mike. And I could have called Steve and had like the martini or whatever fashion drink they do up.
That's my move.
Yeah, right. Whatever. And
Mike came to a dinner. I had Shoemaker Advisors, Ryan Walker, obvious up there. He came to a dinner that we had in Houston last year, and I was like, first off, this cat is cool as hell. Second off, I'm like, this guy's got to lead around. Like he's very down to earth. Very down to earth.
I mean, the leaders that I've worked with, I mean, they all have a variety of interesting attributes, but the one thing that they all share in common that I appreciate the most is how personable they are. Like me, like for example, Adina, she would go like, where do you go shopping? I'm like, well, what do you mean? She's like, I really like the suit. I'm like, I actually go mannequin shopping. She's like, what the hell is that? I'm like, well, I go to a store and I look at the mannequin and whatever mannequin I think is dressed the best, I said, I'll take that. And then I get it and I leave. She's like, that's amazing. Like, I'm going to have my husband do that. And so like 2 weeks later, we were at another meeting and, she's obviously running it. But before the meeting, she's like, hey, come here. She's like, mannequin shopping? It's the way to go. I was like,
oh, okay. Sure. Yeah.
But I mean, and then, the thing about Mike, sneaky undercover, really good at dodgeball. Like
dodgeball.
So
wait. When does a dodgeball circumstance come up that he's good?
So he's got a leadership conference that he hosts internally for his people who are director and above. And he invited me to speak at this leadership conference. It was like the U.S. needs a larger energy boat. And he's like, well, if you want, you can stick around. I was like, okay, well, like, what do you got going on? He's like, well, there's these presentations, and he had a couple other people. I'm like, wow, yeah. And he's like, and, I think you should play dodgeball. And so he separates the team into 4s, and they have a dodgeball tournament, and he plays in it. And man, he did a couple moves. Like, once again, I don't sound like too cheerleader, but I was just impressed. Like, he had like a matrix move, like someone just darted the ball in matrix. And then he's got, 3 or 4 of the guys played like college baseball. So like, you're just trying to dodge
shoulders,
like 90-mile-an-hour heaters coming at you with a dodgeball. And you're like, okay, just a little bit different, but it was awesome.
I haven't thought of dodgeball strategy since probably 1992. So I appreciate you kind of,
you got to stay in the back, let them all throw, and then hoard it. And then when they go on the defensive, you charge, and then you just throw it as hard as you can.
And then you have to have a real believable face, like that didn't hit. So
it gets pretty dicey pretty quick because like they're smaller. So like if you hit it, it could look like it would hit your hand, but you get the benefit of the doubt. But in any case,
so talk to me.
Mike Howard, sneaky good dodgeball player.
Talk to me about this book. All right, let's wrap it up here and let's get people how to connect with you. And also, I guess when it comes to guidance, when it comes to what you focus on at Pickard Energy Partners, where and why would someone reach out to you? So let's get to the book and actually talk about keep talking about your book like I'm listening, because I want to go get something else. So
the gist of the book is like, how do we get to a place where it's just it's much easier to talk about energy policy on a broader scale. I think the frustration that I was experiencing when I was giving my presentations on the state of the state was you'd have polar ends of the argument drown out the logical voices in the room. And like that became increasingly irritating because you would go and do these talks, and for a short period of time, all it seemed that people were doing were they were taking bits and pieces of the presentation and they were like moving it over to their side to just fire with fire. And like what I wanted to do was like I wanted it to appeal to like a younger audience. So like my kids, because what really resonated in addition to that story I talked about where like the lady was like, electricity comes from electricity. Like my kids are learning about this stuff in school. And frankly, it's crap. Like, and I live in Florida, dude. Like I live in the epicenter of like school should be like a very certain way. And, you know, my son, I actually told this story to Chuck Yates. My son came home one day and he's like, you'd be so proud of me. I'm like, what happened? He's like, they're talking, the teacher was in science class. They're talking about like the power of renewables. And my son, who was probably 10 at the time, 10 or 11, goes, no. Like renewable power is not, he goes, renewable power is not baseload power. And the teacher goes, well, what do you mean? Like baseload power? Like, no. And like the teacher herself did not know the concept of baseload power, yet she was teaching this class about the merit of renewables. And I was like, I don't know if I won't say I like certain superlative, like certain.
That really frustrates. That frustrates me. Son.
Like, gosh darn it, I'm so upset with this. And I was like, well, I'm proud of you. So I took him to get like some ridiculous amount of ice cream. But then I was like, man, this is it. And so I knew in the back of my mind I was going to write it. It was a function of like, when am I going to find the time?
Yes.
And like literally serendipitously, you know, the oil and gas gods must be on my side. Cause like a week later, I'm sitting in the airport and it's one of those United things where it's like delay, 20 minutes. And then it's like, well, we don't have pilots. It's like, all right, dude. So instead of like getting worked up and pissed off, I just started doing it. And then sure enough, like it just one thing led to another. And I had written so many other things too, like shorter thought leadership pieces, like 5-6 pages, and just aggregated that into one thing.
And do you have this book on your
you do? Amazon,
okay. So you can go check out Dan Romito, Dan Ramito over at Pickard Any Partners. The book is called The Radical. Is this it? The Radical Middle?
Yep, the Radical
Middle. How fossil fuels and renewables can collaborate. Love it. On the future of energy. Yeah. Dan, I love this, buddy. And what age group is this for?
I mean, it's for any age group, but I mean, I have kids as young as like 10.
So I bought this, and I'm not gonna be one of those guys. I bought it just to obviously take a. I mean, I dig this shit, so I'm gonna take a look at this. I haven't read it yet, but I got it on my Kindle, and also, this isn't for everyone, but I also wrote a children's book called Energy for Everyone. Yeah, so I need to get back to doing that stuff. Man, the fact you're doing this,
just two very established authors having a conversation.
We're just having author talk. Like that's just what we do. Talk. Like we're just like, where's my journal? Like, where's
the biggest thing? Like when the kids, so like obviously every now and then the kids need help with their homework, and traditionally like I've taken the math, and my wife has taken like anything other than like English and all that other stuff. And she actually got a little bit pissed, right? Because the kids are coming to me with like their English homework. She's like, well, why aren't you coming to me? And they're like, Dad wrote a book, Mom. And she's like, like,
he's an author.
I wrote a book, honey. Like, sorry, you know.
Yeah, no, that's now you got to start introducing yourself as, hey, I'm Dan, an author. But hey, buddy, I appreciate your time. I know this is an hour of your life, and I know you got to step off. But buddy, I'll be seeing you. If I don't see you sooner than later, I'll be seeing you at the Crew Club Operator Roundtable. You'll be leading another great discussion, which I'm excited about, which kind of is kind of the basis on why we had this conversation right now. And the conversation you're going to be giving, and that's going to be in Houston on May 22nd, is the energy, power, and water paradigm for Texas and the U.S. and the world has changed. So check Dan out. The book, again, is called, you can find it on Amazon. It's called The Radical Middle, How Fossil Fuels and Renewables Can Collaborate in the Future of Energy. I'm sure you've seen Nick Diolis's book as well. He's got, I love seeing all these authors. I know there's Kyle Wagner that has his book. There's Tyler Thompson that has his book. I love all this stuff. So
wait, I think I have the other one that I like, and I don't even know if we know him. I don't know him personally, but it was given to me. Like I'm reading this one. It's the Conservative Environmentalist. Dude, it's actually really, really good.
No.
So I was in Oklahoma. I gave a speech at the Petroleum Alliance of Oklahoma, and this guy was here, and I didn't get a chance to talk to him, but he just wrote it. But it's pretty crazy. He's got a quote from Arnold Schwarzenegger on it. Like I want to know how this guy got to know Arnold Schwarzenegger, but
Benji
Benji Backer. I don't know who he is. He was at a conference that I was speaking at. But that's
common
a good one too. Like
common sense solutions for a sustainable future.
Yeah, so I don't want to do like the buy my book thing, like whatever.
I'll do it. Buy Dan's book.
Yeah, there's a couple other ones that are actually really, really, really good. The other one that I like, this one, good Lord. I mean, I got all these, like Apocalypse Never by Schellenberger. Like that's a really good one too. It's like, so that's the reading list that I got going on.
Dan, I got to say this. You're probably the worst.
Schellenberger.
You're probably the worst author to promote his own book. So thank you for being the worst author to promote their own book.
Yeah.
Promote your book, buddy.
I'm pretty bad. Yeah, but, I mean, all the writings that we do are on my LinkedIn page. Yeah, all my writings are on LinkedIn. I'm happy to take questions. Like I said, in terms of like the business itself, like I would like to say that we are problem solvers that operate within the capital markets. So even if it's just conversation, or frankly, if you just don't agree with anything I said, like I said, back to Steve Black's, advice, like I'm actually much more inclined to listen or to take those calls, and people are like, yeah, this is great. Like I certainly love talking to people in that regard, but like I said, it's fascinating to listen to people, like the tractor mindset. Not saying it's not frustrating, but it does provide us with like a great understanding of where the tea leaves may be heading, and then putting in place, guardrails to ensure that it doesn't happen.
But I also think it strengthens the ability to communicate across the aisle. It strengthens the ability to kind of understand, have some empathy, because at the end of the day, the more you tell someone that they're wrong or that they're idiots and stuff like that, you're just pushing away you're setting camps up. So the more constructive conversations and the more of these conversations you have that are against kind of whatever position you have, the easier it is, and the more exciting it is to start having these across the table conversations.
Yeah, and even in the book, not to give like the plug, but I spent a lot of time, like my brother-in-law's dad was a psychologist for like 40 years. And so I called him up. I'm like, walk me through why people do this. And he basically gave me all the talking points. I incorporated that into the book, just how people digest information and then mold it in a way that they want, and then what to do, not to change their minds, but to at least have them entertain different perspectives. Like there's a whole chapter dedicated to that.
Well, that's a very difficult thing, because most of the times when there's something that's contradictory to your own personal beliefs or something like that, and just as you said, it's whether it's ego, whether it's you don't want to hear something that doesn't align with your beliefs, people don't want to hear it too. So the fact you're having these conversations outside the echo chamber, again, you're having this on your podcast called
Petronoia.
And
Ronoia. Yeah.
And you can find that at Spotify, all that fun stuff. Obviously, with video, I'm sure you can sign that Upright Digital, right? You're doing the video.
Oh, yeah. Our studio is badass, dude. I mean, they did a fantastic job. So it's half in studio and then half remote, like we're doing right now.
I dig it. So everyone, I'm saying, Dan, obviously I appreciate any moment with you, buddy, but the fact that you're just keeping blowing and going, I love seeing you part of this industry. I love watching kind of your travels and what you're contributing and the conversations you're having. Because at the end of the day, shit, man, if we're not having conversations, we're not progressing as an industry. So I appreciate you. Again, check out his book. And again, that book is called The Radical Middle. I just changed it to conservative. The Radical Middle. And reach out to him, connect with him on LinkedIn, and stay plugged in, because he's having conversations that are obviously evolving about where not just the energy industry, but kind of everything, infrastructure, power, water. I mean, it's just, he's a great source of a lot of things knowledgeable. So Dan, always appreciate you, buddy.
Thanks and I love the sporadic spur of the moment thing.
I know. Last minute. So we were on a Teams meeting and said, let's hop over and just do a podcast, man. We were bullshitting enough. So, hey, buddy, appreciate you. Have a happy Easter. And, man, if we know anything in the meantime, let's connect and be good, brother.
I appreciate it. Talk soon, bud.
All right, talk soon. Thank you, everyone out there. If you like it, give us a shout, connect with Dan, and we'll talk to you soon out there.